Insert disk 2.
So, Aaron, this comes in from Discord.
I know him.
So, the question is, what will happen in 20 years when people want to play today's games, which rely on updates and patches to fix bugs? Will Sony, etc., keep them available for old hardware to download, or will we get them another way?
You want to start on this? I've got instant feelings, I can tell you right now.
That's what I want. I want it raw.
Remember last week when I just screamed to start the show? I'm going to try to be more dignified this week. It's already happening. You don't need 20 years. It's happened, we're getting screwed. I want to play City of Heroes with my kid. I want to play it right now. I can't play it right now because they took it down. There's no getting it back. So if you're an MMO fan, you're insta-screwed. I found this show this week, and it goes over what killed these MMOs. And there are MMOs I totally forgot about that people were very passionate about at the time. So it's happened. What's going to happen in 20 years? Really, it depends on... 20 years isn't that long a time. It really is to sit down and think about what you were doing 20 years ago. A lot of it depends on how generous the owners of the game want to be or are able to be. In 20 years, if you want to play EverQuest 1, which it's still up, but I doubt it'll be up in 20 years, you're going to need someone to provide server and someone to provide that code to get everything running. And if you don't have it, you're not going to be playing EverQuest. If you want to play, there were games in the 90s that needed patches and stuff right away that were unplayable. And if you can't access them, you're screwed. It's a little bit easier with that stuff because most of it's documented and held up. But the patches today are sometimes 10 gig. So someone's got to store all this stuff, then give you the access to it. So I don't see a retro gaming scene like there is today. And it's not because they're not as passionate about their games. It's just it'll be so very, very inconvenient. And I don't know what can be done about it. There's no way you can really... I suppose someone could archive a fully patched game and keep it somewhere. There are people that specialize this, like their life's work is to archive stuff. We've heard Rob talk about archiving all those C64 discs, and he's backed them all up or whatever. It's probably a lot of it's probably needless because the stuff's out there, but people like him are the stewards of that stuff. And so one would assume that somewhere there is someone that is working to save some of these games, but I don't know for sure that's happening.
It's interesting that you mentioned that because another thing we were talking about on Discord is that they've just passed a law that says that it's now legal, and this is the United States law, it's now legal to back up and keep code related to MMOs that have gone under.
I saw that, yeah.
And so things are starting to happen in that direction, but like you said, it's too late for a lot of these games. Who knows if any of like the City of Heroes stuff, who knows, maybe all that stuff is just gone forever.
Yeah.
Maybe who was the company that ran it? NCSoft? Or
yeah. They were out of I think they were South Korean.
So maybe when they went under or when they got bought or whatever,
they didn't do either of those. They just took it down because it was not a big hit in Korea.
So maybe that code still exists out there somewhere.
One would assume, and that's a whole other story. But in terms of a non-MMO game, really, it's funny because now every game is like an MMO in that everything gets patched. Some of the patches are so vital that the game is pointless without them. And so when you go into that world, you're into the world where you might not be playing your game. Even something like if you look at the Nintendo Switch, which has that little hard card they store the games on, they still patch stuff, and so they're not even invulnerable. But the rest of it, anything that's like it's downloadable content or whatever, unless it's the archive somewhere, it's probably going to be gone.
Well, I'm going to give you the other side.
All right.
Okay. The other side is that because of digital distribution, fewer games will go out of print and leave the public eye completely. Now, the exception to that is any kind of multiplayer mode. I think what we're going to see is a future where the single-player campaign for many games still exists in one form or another. But anything that requires an external server to keep running, if that is not making money somehow, you won't see it again.
Well, That's very likely.
Because with Steam and things like that, publishers can leave games in print forever, and because of the long tail, they'll probably continue to sell to some greater or lesser extent.
Yeah.
And what you will see is you'll see more and more great deals where 5 years after a game is out, you'll be able to buy it for 99 cents.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think that we could go one of two ways, but I think the people that are going to suffer the most are going to be, like you said, the MMO fans, because they're going to get really attached to a particular world, and when that world is no longer profitable to maintain, there's no fail-safe to keep that going.
I think, but I mean, getting back to, I think a lot of games are, how many games, we don't know what's patched in these games, okay? How many games have you heard? I've heard this over and over, and I don't play a lot of modern stuff, but I've heard this from my brother. I listen to other podcasts. Mm-hmm. I went and bought Game X for my PS3, PS4, Xbox One, whatever. But when I got home and put it in, there was a 30-minute download or an hour download. So what is on that disc? Probably whatever's on there is not a playable game.
I don't think so. I think what you're seeing is the cumulative effect of many, many patches over a set amount of time. The game itself is going to be playable. Is it going to be as good of an experience as if you're playing the patched game? Maybe not. But there's been very, very few times where publishers have shipped a broken game right out of the factory.
I think I agree with that up to a point. I think it's becoming more commonplace.
Well, I think it's definitely become more acceptable to let certain things slide in the development process in the knowledge that you're going to be able to patch it later on.
Right.
But just to put a disc in your system and not be able to fire it up at all, or to have some sort of like one of these, Action 52 NES type experiences where the game is just broken.
Remember the controversy a few years ago where they were requiring an internet connection to play your game console? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that was a big deal.
Well, it wasn't to play the game console. It was to play games that you'd bought digitally.
No. That's not what I mean. I mean, the console would check in. It would check in. That was part of it. And when you put in a disc, that's another aspect of it that worries me. And also, you don't hear much about that now. And there's a reason. It's because digital distribution has become more. I mean, this was inevitable. People are more comfortable than they were a generation of consoles ago about getting stuff digitally with no box and no cartridge and no disc. All right, you don't think twice about it now. And what got you there? Just what you said: cheap games. Everyone's got a Steam list with a bunch of games on it, and so it makes a scenario where you lose all your stuff quite possible.
Well, well, I mean, sure. I mean, you could lose all your stuff just like your home could go up in flames. I mean, it's possible, but it's not probable. I mean, Steam is not going anywhere for the foreseeable future, and as long as you have Steam, then you have your library. One of the other things besides the cheapness of digital downloads is the convenience that you can go to any PC, log into your Steam account, and download your games.
But you did say 20 years. Steam is very viable right now, but who knows what's going to happen in 20 years?
Nobody knows, but
so now, and I think Steam also. I wasn't singling them out per se, but I think Steam has an angle where you can actually put the game on your computer somehow, download the game to your computer. I looked into this a couple years now. I don't know about now, but there was a time where like you could actually have the game on your computer without having to be, in case they would ever go away. All right.
Okay. I don't know anything about that.
Yeah, and well, me and Chad and some other paranoid people looked into it. And we're not the only ones. But a smaller service could come and go, and I mean, let's look at the Pinball Arcade people. Now, you can no longer get those tables, but if you own them, you keep them.
Right.
All right.
So nothing has been lost.
But if you're, if they were to go under, for example, there's a very conceivable possibility that once the console you had those games on went out, you were done with them, and if you had the original disc you bought, it didn't come with all the extra tables. I mean, these are possibilities.
Again, this has never. I mean, I don't want to say this has never happened before, but this is not like, for example, remember there was a famous case is like Double Dragon. There was a Double Dragon remake that came out on the 360. That the company went under.
Is that Neon?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
I can't.
I heard that was
Don't write
horrible.
in if that's wrong. It was some Double Dragon
Right
game.
in.
The company went under. You were unable to rebuy you were unable to buy the game again, and even if you had downloaded the game previously, you could not re-download it. But that would still require you to erase the game from your memory card on your 360. So, it's easy to imagine a world where stuff like this happens and everything goes wrong. But we haven't seen that except really for MMOs and except for Call of Duty style a deathmatch multiplayer modes.
But I mean, in 10 or 20 years, then when this stuff's failing, then you're not going to probably, you may or may not. I never like to say there's no way you're getting it back, because I know sneaky, stinky pirate types or archivists are coming up with ways to store this stuff. So but I would say there's probably a future version where it's going to be, it's not going to be something you can just obtain easily and without some additional knowledge to just go out and play your game.
I think that in 10 or 20 years, video game companies will become so good at monetization that they'll figure out a way to serve anybody that wants to play anything, anytime. They'll say, you can still buy that from us. It won't be like downloading TOSEC packs from Internet Archive like it is now.
Let me ask you a question. A lot of people, and this is along the same lines, let's look backwards now. A lot of people and the retro movement has been around for a long time. Mm-hmm. It's strong now. It's always been pretty strong, but now it's really strong. How much of that do you attribute to, this is a two-part question, how much of the current strength of the retro movement do you attribute to people's ability to play these things with emulation over the past, say, 20 years? Percentage-wise, do you think it's 50% of it's strictly because of that, or none of it's because of that? Where do you put the importance? Because I've heard this batted around quite a bit.
That's a great question. I think the number of people that enjoy retro titles that are playing them. The number of people out there that are into retro games that are playing them through some sort of emulation is probably pretty high.
But I'm not even saying that. What I'm saying is, how big a part that emulated classic ROMs play in the current popularity of retro gaming? That's what I want. Because people, anytime a ROM site gets shut down or something, I hear this, oh man, if it wasn't for us, there would be no market for this. And you've heard this before too.
I don't buy that. I think that, for example, if everybody was playing on emulators all the time, then the NES Mini wouldn't have sold 18 billion units. There's a market for people that...
It was released at the right time, though, wasn't it? Don't you think? Because there was a strong retro movement before that was released.
No, before then you had the Jack-specific plug-and-play games. The Space Invaders. There have always been people that enjoyed playing video games when they were younger, and when they see a new thing come out, they're like, oh, I haven't played that in years, I want to buy that. Versus your person that, sits in front of a PC and goes through... Because for a lot of people, even just the whole concept of emulation is beyond the trouble that they want to go through to play something.
Right. So what you're saying is, if I got this right, is that you don't think emulation, the hardcore retro gaming fans that sprung up in the early 90s and ran till today had a whole lot to do with the current retro movement that is in full swing and they're making money hand over fist.
That's correct.
Correct.
What do you think?
Unpopularly, I would tend to agree with you. I think what played a bigger role is time. The age of the people got right. If you consider, listen, I love the Atari 2600, okay? And I even like Pong back in the day. But I wasn't overly anxious to go out and re-experience those games, all right? Now, I'm not saying anything bad about it, and there are some great ones. But the era of the Nintendo, the Genesis, that era, not only is it tickle that retro days of old, but also the games hold up. They hold up well. They look good enough to be fun today and show good on your TV, and it's a retro thing. And I think that is the biggest part of the movement, not so much that there was this, I mean, there's this, and you've heard it, but there's this weird feeling that people have that and are mad at Nintendo or mad at these other companies because they've taken these ROMs down. It's like, how dare they? We built their business. Well, not really.
Right.
In my opinion.
We built their business. If their business was giving us all their intellectual property and letting us distribute it freely across the internet.
I'm not going to be mean to these people because I can, in fact, maybe I've had that in my head before.
And all these people saying we, I guarantee you that 99.999% of them were not involved in any sort of development of the emulator or dumping.
I'm not even saying that. But what I'm saying is, when like that MU Paradise went down, I think Nintendo shut down their ROMs section, for example. And this happens every couple years.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you've been in this as long as I have. And I've heard this argument before that, like, if it wasn't for us, we built the community. We with the conventions, we made it popular. I mean, I'm not discounting all of that, but I'm saying, and I think it was a very, very small percentage of the overall appeal. I think it's just some people were more passionate about it and held on to it harder, and they kept at it. They found a way to do it and play it. But like you said, the majority of people, they don't know what emulation is.
Right.
They don't. And I mean, look, you know what emulation is, and you wanted these little mini things. You know, why did you want them? Because you're nostalgic. You may have your other reasons. You could say, I want to support them or whatever. But I mean, you wanted one because they're cool looking. You like it. It reminds you of the old days, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's and it has nothing to do with the retro community of ROM players out there. I mean, I'm not undercutting or discounting the emulation people that put that stuff together because they're incredible. But I'm just saying, I just think that has played a small role in the overall appeal. Now, all that aside, switching back to the modern stuff, we live in a world now where you can literally play any game you want, if you want to, from the beginning of games up until the current day stuff. Will this continue? In 20 years, we may be able to play anything. Storage-wise, we'll probably be able to store whatever we want.
Well, there won't be storage. Everything will be streamed from the cloud.
That's still storage.
Well,
my point is, you'll have access to an unlimited amount of data.
Sure.
So that won't be an issue.
Yeah.
So technology willing, theoretically, if we're playing everything we want to now, we probably will be able to do the same thing then. If again, the only thing that's going to stop it is lawyers and people that have digital rights stuff going on where they don't want it distributed. I think that's going to be the key. So if you get past that, I don't think there'll be a problem.
And I think, I'm not really the best person to ask about this because for me, my best gaming days and my favorite games and all of that stuff is all behind me. Like, I am not playing modern games. I have no interest in 99% of all the games that are currently released. So, like, if we can't play Xbox 360 games 20 years from now, I'm not going to care. Like, because the stuff that I want to play forever is the stuff I can play now. But I know that there's lots of people that are very passionate about current day stuff, and they worry about that stuff for the future. And I feel bad for them because you really don't know, but I take some comfort in the fact that I'll always be able to play NES games and Super Nintendo games and Amiga games.
The thing I wonder, I guess people are nostalgic forever, all right, going forward. I wonder how nostalgic people are going to be in 20 years for games out now. This is not an indictment of those games because their games are great. A lot of them are really good. But I just wonder if people are going to have the same makeup because these are people going to be growing up at a different age. When I was a little kid, video games came around. It was like a revelation. You'd never see anything like it, okay? My son has access to a tablet, a computer, the Switch, an arcade, every game ever made. Mm-hmm. He can play. Plus, he's in a world where there's virtual reality. He's in a world where he's limitless in what he can do. All the channels he wants. So, how big an impact is this stuff going to have on his life versus the impact it had on people who didn't have anything but Nintendo, for example?
Here's something else about that. There were tons of people that grew up the same generation as you that video games were a part of their youth, but then once they grew up, they stopped playing them and they moved on.
Yeah.
I think you're going to have the same thing with people in your son's generation where, maybe video games will affect him in some profound way and he'll want to hold on to it forever. Or maybe he'll play around with video games for a while and then he'll find some passion somewhere else and he'll never come back.
I just want, we didn't grow up with the internet, for example. I mean, there are big facets. There are so many more avenues of entertainment than there were. I wonder, I mean, I'm not saying people aren't going to be passionate about games. I just wonder if they're going to have a more diverse, nostalgia feeling when they go back. And boy, I'd like to see what a CRT looks like again. Something like, I mean, just as an example, so in the future, in 20 years, who knows what even the demand for retro is going to be? I mean, it may be super huge. I don't know. I'm just speculating.
I think if you've got to look at the way that things have always been. The way I look at it is like the birth of pop culture. It was like the 50s and the 60s, So you have all these people that grow up with the Beatles and stuff like that, and then when they get money, what do they want to buy? They want to buy all the Beatles records and the Elvis records, so the prices go through the roof, And that goes up until we get to like you don't really see it, I guess. I don't know. I'm not involved in the classic movie scene. It's not like people are collecting, vintage stuff because the resolution keeps getting better with Blu-rays and stuff like that. So I don't know how
people do collect it. Though.
Yeah. But I mean, with video games, I kind of see more akin to the record collecting phenomenon, where there's this memory of them when they were a kid with this thing. They don't have the thing for a while, then they see the thing in a store, they see the thing online, and they want it because it recaptures that memory.
I don't know. Everyone I knew used to collect baseball cards. Right? How many people collect them now? Well, not nearly as many. I know they still do, but they're not. It's way down. Things come and go.
Yeah, and maybe you're right, but I don't think that video game collecting or people liking video games throughout their lives, that is not going to go away.
Maybe not.
It just may not be to the degree that it is now, or maybe it'll be bigger.
But you're assuming Super Duper Thing 5000 doesn't come out in 10 years. That makes you forget about all this other crap. You never know. Super Duper Thing 5000 for me was video games and computers. I don't know what before that stuff came around. What were my interests? I liked dinosaurs and stuff. I'm just saying. I'm not saying you're wrong. It's going to be a lot of it's dependent on just what happens in the next 10 years or 20 years. But I think there'll be there's always going to be somebody passionate about games. That's for sure.